Hi everyone! The next series of videos you are about to watch might give you some sense of the déjà vu. Once again we are heading to an area that can more or less be described as Costa Blanca, the same region that got a 3-episode series exactly a year ago. This year looked very similar. I explained the reasons for coming back to the same place a bit later, maybe not in this episode. There will definitely be better moments to talk about logistics as well as the pros and cons of this whole region that we call Costa Blanca in the title, even though the area itself is actually a little bit different and much bigger. In this video I will focus on 2 cracks where you will see 3 different routes. A bit differently than in most videos on my channel, unfortunately most of the climbing footage this time has no sound. There were several reasons for that. In Lukasz's case, he accidentally turned off the mic while clipping it onto his clothes. In other clips, the microphone battery died, and in few attempts we launched the drone mid-ascent when the drizzle stopped, and of course the climber wasn't wearing a mic because of that. So the crack you are watching right now is Cocentaina, located in the mountains west of the coast. The sector is literally just a few minutes drive from a fairly large town where you can easily find decent accommodation and places to shop. It's not a tiny village like Cocentaina or Chulilla, where apart from a few houses and one shop there is nothing much else going on. The climbing area is divided into 5 parts. A bit like CUs, the subsectors overlap and you can smoothly move from one to another, but they are much smaller. Each subsector has around 20 routes and it's probably about 50 meters wide. Almost all the routes are long and very endurance based. Maybe a few lines on the far right are more bouldery at the start, but that's literally just a handful of routes that break from general style. What is interesting is the vaulting. On some routes it's quite comfortable. On the route Lukasz is climbing right now you can see classic rack leap from your knees to above your head situation, which makes it possible to enjoy the climb without having some sort of heart palpitations. But there are also routes with half as many bolts and then you can get easily 5 to 6 meter runouts. On thecrack.com they are often labeled as space bolted. I did 2 of such routes myself and I can recommend both to climbers who enjoy a controlled trail. They are called Apocalypse Bliss and Osama Bin Laden, both graded 7A. As for the rock, it's good quality limestone, basically no tufas. In one subsector there is a tiny tufas in the first few meters, but that's all for the whole sector. Apart from that there is a lot of jugs and big pockets and plenty of good edges. Speaking of jugs, I climbed a 7A here that probably had the biggest holes I've ever grabbed in my life. The jugs were sticking out from the wall so much that I was afraid I would rip them off. Being 4 meters above the last bolt, I didn't know it was possible to feel that stressed because of such huge holes. The area isn't in high mountains, but it's not by the sea either, so it's naturally slightly cooler than around Gandia. The wall has sun exposure, but the first meters of the routes are often in the shade because of the trees, and there are hills behind you that make the sun disappear quite quickly. When it's like 10 or less degrees, climbing isn't very comfortable. On the other hand, with 20 degrees and full sun you'll probably get cooked. I would say the golden middle is around like 12 to 15 degrees, and everything above that it's best to have some clouds. Of course it all depends on your personal tolerance to temperature. This is another video on the channel featuring Chulilla, but this time we are heading into the branch of the canyon closer to the town. Last year you saw a sector far from town. Depending on the branch, the approach can be shorter or longer. The closest sectors are just a few minutes walk from the town, but they are not the best quality, very polished, and the routes aren't long. If you descend into the canyon, you can reach one of the best sectors called Paret and Front, sorry for my French, which is divided into subsectors and probably has around 100 routes in total. The approach takes about 20 minutes. First you go downhill, then walk on the flat terrain, and finally a fairly steep 3 to 4 minutes up to the wall. If you go deeper into the canyon, you can walk all the way from the town, which is a really long hike, at least like 50 minutes, or you can drive to one of two parking areas on either end of the canyon, and then depending on the sector you will have 20 to 30 minute approach. In the last year film we chose that option, and you can see a bit of like a vlog from that walk. Thanks to the canyon's different aspects, you can choose to climb in warmer or cooler conditions. The sector we climbed is generally good for colder days. Normally it gets sun for most of the day, and if it hadn't been so humid, with a bit more sun and about 10 degrees more, we would probably be frying in the sun, but this time it was completely different. It was cold and humid. The route Mateusz is climbing is somehow unusual for Chulilla standards. The terrain between the bouldery cruxes is really easy. If you removed both cruxes, it probably wouldn't be harder than, I guess, I don't know, 6B+. Normally in Chulilla the routes are more endurance based, and the crux sections are only slightly harder than the rest. The hardest move is reaching from an unstable position, something like a drop knee, to a hidden ledge, and from that ledge you have to reach left to a weak rounded hold, and the only thing that saves you in that position is foothold far out left, which allows you to sit on the foot and move your whole body strongly in that direction. That shift reveals new holds and glues you more into the wall. Once you grab the jack, the hardest sequence is over. From there you have a few more moves with a heel hook or toe hook and literally 2 or 3 sloppers before the anchor. The route I'm climbing is similar in character, although it has a few more cruxes. First, there is a quite demanding climbing through the first 3 bolts, then you get a possible no-hand rest and another section of about a dozen moves. You have to first reach underclings from a very low position, then there's a short traverse to the right that allows you to reach a pretty okay ledge. From there you have like few more moves and additional 3 or 4 moves on the slopers before grabbing better holds. After that, there are several meters of slabby terrain where you can easily get a no-hand rest, and from there you enter a slight overhang that starts with moderately difficult climbing. And then you finally reach the hardest section. You have to lock off on sort of a rounded side pull pinch, and from a high feet working in opposition on the left side, reach pretty good input hold. From there you get a small rest, followed by a sequence on 3 worse holds that leads to an interesting feature just below the top, a really huge rounded jug. It's really hard for me to decide whether to call it slopper or a jug, but I would say you can relax on that hold, so theoretically it's a jug. From that jug you have 2 options for the final crux. Either, like I do in the video, move into a tiny gaston and place your right foot into the opposition, or alternatively reach the slopers on the right, far above your head, and add a heel hook with your left leg to your left hand, which allows you to sit onto it and grab the holds above the anchor. I really recommend that route, it's really great. One of the best 7Cs I did in Chulilla. The rock quality is absolutely phenomenal. So I hope you enjoyed the video. This isn't the last one from Costa Blanca area. We spent quite a few climbing days there, so definitely there is more to come.